Lieutenant Jung Kim's eyes burned from staring at the monitor for 12 straight hours. The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Jupiter was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment and occasional beats. Most of his colleagues had already left for their quarters, leaving the night shift eerily empty. He reached for his coffee mug, finding it disappointingly cold. Just as he was about to stand for a refill, an unusual pattern flashed across his screen. June froze, his hand suspended in midair. The signal pulsed again, a distinct pattern that couldn't possibly be natural cosmic noise. He quickly ran the standard analysis protocols, heart beating faster with each passing second. The computer confirmed what he already suspected. The signal was artificial. More concerning, the pattern matched known distress frequencies. "Captain Park, you need to see this," he called out, his voice cutting through the quiet station. Captain Yun Park emerged from her office, walking briskly across the monitoring floor. She had been reviewing reports and looked mildly annoyed at the interruption. "This better be important, Lieutenant," she said, adjusting her uniform as she approached his station. "I've detected an unusual signal from the Draconis system," Jun explained, pointing to the waveform displayed on his screen. "It matches known distress patterns." Captain Park's expression shifted from annoyance to focused attention as she leaned over his station. "How long has it been broadcasting?" "First detection was 7 minutes ago. It's repeating on a 30-second cycle." Park's eyes narrowed as she studied the signal pattern. "That's definitely artificial. And you're certain about the origin?" June nodded, pulling up the stellar map. "The Draconis system, specifically the fourth planet. That's the Antheri homeworld." The captain's face darkened. The Antheri were one of the few peaceful species humanity had encountered since achieving faster-than-light travel. They were an ancient civilization, technically advanced but entirely non-militaristic. Their philosophy centered around harmony and knowledge-sharing. "Run a deeper analysis," she ordered. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." June's fingers flew across the keyboard, enhancing the signal and filtering out background noise. The cleaned-up transmission displayed on the main screen, and the pattern became unmistakable. "It's an SOS, Captain. No doubt about it." The message repeated a simple mathematical sequence, followed by visual data showing a planet under attack. Massive ships of unknown design appeared briefly before the transmission looped back to the beginning. "The Antheri aren't in our protection treaty," Captain Park said quietly, "but they've always been friendly to Earth." She straightened up, decision made. "Alert command immediately. Tell them we've received a distress call from beyond our jurisdiction. Mark it urgent priority." Jun opened a secure channel to Earth's United Space Command headquarters. As he prepared the message, the station's systems automatically recorded and archived the continuing Antheri distress signal. "Should we try to respond to them?" Jun asked. Captain Park considered for a moment. "Not yet. We don't know who's attacking them, or if responding might make things worse. Let command make that call." Across the station, emergency protocols activated as other officers arrived to help analyze the signal. Within minutes, the quiet night shift had transformed into a hub of focused activity. "The signal strength is weakening," reported Officer Min from another station. "Whatever's happening there, it's getting worse." Captain Park moved to the central command table, pulling up all available data on the Antheri civilization. "We know they have minimal defensive capabilities. They've always relied on diplomacy." The main screen showed the last known images of the Antheri, tall, graceful beings with iridescent skin who had welcomed human explorers with open arms just years earlier. "Transmission to command complete," Jun announced. "They've acknowledged receipt and are assembling an emergency council." Captain Park nodded grimly. "Now we wait, but continue monitoring. Record everything. If someone is attacking the Antheri, we need to document it all." The hours crawled by as they watched the distress signal grow increasingly desperate. Occasionally, brief video transmissions came through, showing glimpses of destruction and panic. Finally, The secure channel blinked with an incoming message from Earth. Captain Park, the stern face of Admiral Kang appeared on screen. We've reviewed your report. A diplomatic and reconnaissance fleet is being prepared to investigate the situation in the Draconis system. How soon can they deploy, Admiral? Park asked. Within 12 hours. Commander Lee will lead the mission. In the meantime, continue monitoring and report any changes immediately. After the transmission ended, Captain Park turned to her crew. Whatever is happening at Antheri, humanity will respond. Not because of treaties or obligations, but because it's the right thing to do. June looked back at his screen, where the distress signal continued its plea for help. He thought about the gentle Antheri he had once met at a diplomatic function. They had spoken of peace among the stars, as if it were inevitable. I just hope we're not too late, he said quietly. The SOS pulsed on, each repetition seeming more desperate than the last. Commander Hannah Lee stood tall on the bridge of the HSV Defender, her hands clasped behind her back, as she watched the final countdown to exit from jump space. The diplomatic fleet she commanded consisted of 5 ships, not a military force, but a humanitarian and investigative mission dispatched in response to the desperate SOS from the Antheri. Jump exit in 10 seconds, announced the navigation officer. Hannah took a deep breath. This was her first command of a multi-ship mission, and though she hoped to find the situation less dire than feared, her gut told her otherwise. The distress signal had continued for 3 days before abruptly cutting off. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exit complete. The view screen flickered as the ships transitioned back to normal space. The sudden silence on the bridge told Hannah everything before she even processed what she was seeing. The Antheri homeworld hung before them like a wounded creature. Once beautiful orbital stations were now twisted metal debris. The planet's night side, which should have glowed with city lights, was mostly dark except for massive fires burning across the surface. "Spirits help us," someone whispered. Hannah swallowed hard. Status report. Her officers snapped back to attention, fingers flying across control panels. "Significant atmospheric disturbance," reported Science Officer Jin. "Readings suggest widespread destruction of major population centers." "No response to our standard greeting signals," Communications Officer Yuma added. "I'm scanning all Antheri frequencies." Hannah nodded grimly. "Deploy observation drones. I want close surface imagery and atmospheric samples. Maintain defensive posture, shields at maximum." The small fleet spread out in standard observation formation. The HSV Defender remained at the center while the 4 support vessels, Observer, Explorer, Messenger, and the smaller Scout, took positions to maximize sensor coverage. "Commander," Officer Ta called suddenly from tactical, his voice tight. Massive energy signatures approaching from behind the planet's larger moon. Unknown configuration. Hannah turned sharply. On screen. Maximum magnification. The view screen shifted to show what had been hidden behind the moon. Hannah felt her blood run cold. 5 enormous vessels were moving toward them, each easily 3 times the size of the Defender. Their design was angular and predatory, with what appeared to be massive weapons ports along their hulls. Nothing in the known galactic database matched their configuration. "Are they the ones who attacked the Antheri?" asked Lieutenant Park, her voice barely audible. "Seems likely," Hannah replied, keeping her voice steady for the crew. "Yuna, open a channel on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocols." "Channel open, Commander." Hannah stepped forward. "Attention unknown vessels. This is Commander Hannah Lee of the Earth Diplomatic Fleet. We are here on a humanitarian mission in response to a distress call. We seek peaceful communication and offer assistance to the Antheri people." The bridge crew waited in tense silence. Seconds stretched into a full minute with no response. "They're scanning us," Tay reported. "Intense energy readings directed at each of our ships." Hannah nodded. "Hold position. Continue broadcasting peaceful intentions." "Commander," Jin called urgently from the science station. I'm detecting energy buildups in what appear to be weapons systems on the alien vessels. Before Hana could respond, Officer Yume shouted, "Incoming transmission. Audio only." The voice that filled the bridge was deep and mechanical, likely translated through some device. "Your presence is unauthorized. This system and its resources now belong to the Vork Dominion. Depart immediately or be eliminated." Hana stepped forward again. "We mean no harm. We simply wish to ensure the safety of the Anthuri people." And the transmission cut off abruptly. In the next instant, a brilliant beam of energy lanced out from the lead alien vessel, striking the Scout, their smallest ship, directly amidships. The view screen automatically dimmed as the Scout erupted into a blinding explosion. 70 crew members gone in an instant. "Evasive maneuvers," Hana shouted, already moving to the tactical station. "All ships scatter pattern Delta. Defensive positions only." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers carried out her orders. The remaining 4 human ships broke formation, engines flaring as they executed emergency maneuvers. "They're targeting the observer next," Todd warned. Hana made a split-second decision. "All ships, maintain evasive patterns. Activate all recording systems at maximum capacity. We need to document everything." Another energy beam sliced through space where the messenger had been moments before. "Commander, we can't outrun them," Lieutenant Park said. "Their weapons outrange ours by a significant margin." "We're not here to fight," Hana replied firmly. "Prepare emergency jump coordinates. We need to retreat with what we've learned." As the ships desperately maneuvered to avoid destruction, the sensors continued gathering data. Images of the devastated planet, readings from the attacking vessels, everything they could capture. "Jump drives charging," the navigation officer reported. 30 seconds to emergency jump capability. Hana watched as another beam grazed the explorer's shields, causing the vessel to shudder violently. "Send one final message," she ordered. "Tell Earth what we found, and that we're coming home with evidence of who did this." The Vork vessels were closing in, their massive forms blotting out the stars as the human fleet prepared to flee. "For the Anthuri," Hana whispered, "we will return." The HSV Defender limped into Earth orbit, battle scars visible along its hull. Emergency repairs had barely kept the ship functioning during the desperate journey home. Of the 5 vessels that had departed on the diplomatic mission, only 3 returned. The Observer and Defender had sustained heavy damage, while the Explorer bore only minor wounds thanks to its superior maneuverability. The Scout and Messenger were simply gone. Crowds gathered in public squares across Earth as news of the fleet's return spread. The mission had been high profile from the start, humanity's first response to an alien distress call. Now, people waited anxiously to learn what had happened. Commander Hannah Lee stood in the main hangar of the orbital station as medical teams rushed past, tending to injured crew members. Her uniform was wrinkled from days without rest, dark circles under her eyes. She had not slept properly since they'd fled the Anthuri system. "Commander," a voice drew her attention. "The Council is waiting." She nodded, straightening her shoulders. The evidence they had gathered needed to reach Earth's leadership immediately. As she walked toward the shuttle that would take her to the surface, she passed the Explorer's captain. "Good luck down there," he said quietly. "Make them understand." The journey to United Earth headquarters took 30 minutes. Hannah spent it reviewing the presentation one final time. The footage was disturbing, but necessary. The world needed to see what they had witnessed. General Sung met her at the landing pad, his weathered face grim. "I've reviewed your preliminary report," he said as they walked. "The Council is in emergency session. Every nation is represented." "Have you shown them any of the footage?" Hannah asked. "No. I thought it best. They see it with your context." The general's steps were heavy. They need to hear it from someone who was there. They entered the Grand Council chamber, where representatives from every Earth nation sat in tiered rows. The chamber fell silent as Hannah took her position at the central podium. Above, massive screens waited to display the evidence she had brought home. "Commander Lee," the council president began, "we understand your fleet suffered casualties. On behalf of Earth, we extend our condolences. Please share what you discovered." Hannah nodded once, then activated the display. 3 days ago, we arrived at the Antheri homeworld in response to their distress signal. This is what we found. The screens came to life, showing the devastated planet. Gasps echoed around the chamber as the images shifted to close-up footage captured by their drones before they were forced to retreat. Once beautiful Antheri cities lay in ruins. The graceful spires that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to rubble. Drone footage showed Antheri survivors being herded into camps by massive armored figures, the Vork ground forces. The aliens towered over the slender Antheri, nearly 3 meters tall with heavy exoskeletons. The most disturbing images showed Antheri families being separated, children taken in one direction, adults in another. The drones had captured audio as well, the haunting sounds of Antheri crying out for their loved ones. Our sensors recorded extensive mining operations already underway, Hannah continued, her voice steady despite the emotion visible on her face. The Vork appear to be stripping the planet of resources while using the population as forced labor. She switched to footage of the Vork ships, then the attack on their fleet. The council watched in stunned silence as the scout disintegrated under enemy fire. When the presentation ended, the chamber remained quiet for several long moments. General Sung stepped forward. "Based on communications we intercepted before retreating, the species calls themselves the Vork. They claim the entire system as their property now, including all biological resources. They consider the Antheri and likely us as well to be nothing more than assets to be exploited." A counselor from the African Union stood. "Did they give any reason for their attack? Any demands or warnings before opening fire?" "Only that we leave immediately," Hannah replied. "When I attempted to discuss the Antheri people, they cut communication and attacked." "And you believe they pose a direct threat to Earth?" asked a representative from South America. "I do," Hannah said firmly. "Their technology is advanced, their methods brutal, and they showed no interest in diplomacy. If they're willing to enslave the Antheri, who have been part of the galactic community for centuries, they would not hesitate to do the same to us." The council president leaned forward. "What options do we have?" "Our fleet is primarily exploratory, not military." General Sung cleared his throat. "That is not entirely accurate, Madam President. After the Centauri incident, all major powers began developing defensive capabilities. Separately, in secret, I propose we combine these resources immediately." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The secret military buildup had been suspected but never openly acknowledged. Counselor G from the East Asian Coalition rose slowly. Her age showed in her movements, but her voice rang clear. "They've made a critical error," she said simply. "They've awakened humanity." The chamber fell silent again. "Throughout our history," she continued, "humanity has shown its worst and best qualities during times of crisis. We fight amongst ourselves endlessly, but when faced with a true threat, a true injustice against the innocent," she looked around the chamber, "we unite, and heaven help those who stand against us when we do." The images of Antheri children being torn from their parents still played silently on the screens above. "I propose an immediate vote," the council president said, "to form a unified Earth Defense Force and prepare a response to the Vork aggression." Hannah watched as hands rose across the chamber, a unanimous decision. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. "Commander Lee," the president said, "thank you for bringing this evidence home. Rest now. Tomorrow, we begin planning humanity's response." As Hannah left the chamber, screens worldwide displayed the footage she had brought back, along with a simple message: humanity stands with the Antheri. The lunar naval shipyards had never seen such activity. Ships of all sizes filled the massive construction base: sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers, and support vessels bearing the flags and markings of nations that had been rivals for centuries. Workers in spacesuits swarmed over hulls, installing weapons systems and reinforcing armor plating. What would normally take years was being accomplished in weeks. Admiral Dad 1 stood at the observation window, hands clasped behind his back. At 62, he had expected to finish his career teaching at the Space Academy. Instead, he found himself appointed Supreme Commander of the largest military force humans had ever assembled. Quite a sight, isn't it? General Sung asked, joining him at the window. Day nodded. 3 months ago, these ships were hidden in separate facilities across the solar system. Some were disguised as research vessels, others buried in asteroid bases. Now they fight together. Necessity breeds strange alliances, Sung replied. How soon can we launch? The main fleet will be ready in 7 days. The support vessels need another 10. Below them, a massive warship moved slowly out of its construction bay. The UES Vengeance gleamed under the work lights, its hull bristling with weapons that had been theoretical designs until the crisis began. The Chinese antimatter cannons were successfully integrated. Some asked. Yes, along with the Russian shield technology and European targeting systems. Dad turned to face his old friend. We've accomplished in 3 months what should have taken 5 years. They walked together through the station toward the command center. Crew members from dozens of countries snapped to attention as they passed. Many wore uniforms that still showed the hasty addition of the new United Earth insignia, a simple blue globe with a protective shield. The Council has approved your battle plan, Sung said as they entered a secure briefing room, though some members still hope for a diplomatic solution. Day's expression hardened. The Vork had their chance for diplomacy when Commander Lee attempted contact. They responded by destroying 2 of our ships and slaughtering the Antheri. No, this is not a diplomatic mission. The door opened again, and a group of officers entered, the captains of the fleet's main vessels. They represented every major spacefaring nation on Earth. Some had been rivals at the Academy, others had faced each other in border disputes. Now they sat together, united by a common enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, Dai began. In 1 week, we launched the defense of not just Earth, but of all free species in our sector of the galaxy. He activated the holographic display, showing the Antheri system and the positions of known Vork forces based on their latest intelligence. The Vork have established mining operations on 3 planets and have moved most of the surviving Antheri to labor camps here and here. He indicated the locations. Their fleet consists of approximately 20 major warships and numerous smaller vessels. They outnumber us, noted Captain Hannah Lee, recently promoted after her mission to Antheri. The burns on her face from the bridge fire during their escape were still healing. In ship count, yes, Da agreed, but not in determination, not in ingenuity, and not in righteous anger. He expanded the display to show the planned approach of the Earth fleet. The Vork believe themselves superior in every way. They've conquered peaceful species who lack the will or means to fight back. They have no experience facing an enemy who has spent its entire history perfecting the art of warfare. The captains leaned forward, studying the battle plan. We will use their arrogance against them, Da continued. They expect a frontal assault, the primitive humans charging forward to be slaughtered. Instead, we'll divide our forces. Captain Lee will lead the visible fleet as a distraction, while Captain Kim takes our stealth vessels behind their lines to free the Anthera prisoners and sabotage their mining operations. The briefing continued for hours, with each captain questioning, suggesting, improving the plan. Despite their diverse backgrounds, they worked together seamlessly. The Vork had accomplished what centuries of human diplomacy could not: true global unity. As the meeting concluded, a communications officer burst into the room. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the edge of our system, definitely Vork in origin. Dai and the captains moved quickly to the command center. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Vork commander. The alien's exoskeleton gleamed under harsh lights, its multiple eyes fixed on the camera. Humans, The translated voice boomed. "We have monitored your childish preparations. Your primitive weapons and ships pose no threat to the Vork Dominion. We claim this sector and all resources within it. Stay in your system or be exterminated. This is your only warning." The transmission ended abruptly. The command center was silent for a moment. Then several officers began speaking at once, voices rising in anger. Day raised his hand, silencing them. To everyone's surprise, he was smiling. "They just made our job easier," he said calmly. "How so, Admiral?" asked Captain Kim. "They've confirmed they're monitoring us, which means they can see exactly what we want them to see." Dad turned to his communications officer. "Make sure our visible preparations continue exactly as planned. Let them watch our conventional fleet assembly." He turned back to his captains, his smile fading to a look of grim determination. "The Vork believe us primitive. They expect surrender or retreat. They know nothing of human history, nothing of our capacity for both compassion and righteous fury." He looked around at each face. "We will show them both, compassion for the Antheri and fury for those who harm the innocent." As the captains dispersed to their ships, Day remained in the command center, studying the star chart that showed the path to the Antheri system. In 1 week, humanity would reveal itself to the galaxy not just as explorers, but as warriors, and the Vork would learn a painful lesson about underestimating primitive species. Major Sumin's fighter hung motionless in the darkness of space, power systems at minimum, heat signature masked. Around her, 11 other small craft drifted similarly dark and silent, hidden among the debris field that once formed the outer moon of Antheri. For 6 hours they had waited, watching as the massive Vork patrol ships passed by, oblivious to their presence. "Patience," she whispered to herself, though the comm system was off. Her pilots were the best Earth had to offer, but even they felt the tension of waiting while their comrades in the main fleet engaged the enemy. The distant flashes of battle illuminated her cockpit at irregular intervals. Captain Hannah Lee was leading the frontal assault with 40 warships, drawing Vork attention exactly as planned. The enemy had responded predictably, sending 15 of their 20 capital ships to crush the human attack. Major Sumin watched the Vork formations through her fighter's heads-up display. Their ships moved with arrogant precision, clearly unprepared for what was coming. They maintained perfect battle lines, no ship-breaking formation, exposing their rigid military thinking. Her tactical display pings softly. The signal from Admiral Da. It was time. "Guerrilla squad, execute," she ordered, her voice calm despite the pounding of her heart. 12 fighters powered up simultaneously, engines glowing blue against the blackness of space. They shot from their hiding places like arrows, racing toward the 5 Vork capital ships that had remained to guard the planet. "Remember your training," Sumin said as they approached. "They're bigger, but we're faster. Hit and run. Don't give them a clean shot." The Vork noticed them too late. By the time alarm signals began blaring across the enemy fleet, Guerrilla Squad had already deployed their first wave of mines around the engines of the largest vessel. "Hawkeye, Razor, take the command ship's communication array," Sumin ordered. "Phoenix team, target their weapon systems." Her fighter danced through space, narrowly avoiding energy beams from Vork defensive cannons. Unlike the massive ships they flew between, the human fighters were designed for one thing only: speed and maneuverability. The first mines detonated, sending shockwaves through the Vork flagship. Its engines sputtered and died, leaving it drifting helplessly. Another explosion marked the destruction of its main communication array, cutting it off from the rest of the fleet. "Major, we got company." Lieutenant Beck's voice crackled over the comm. "Enemy fighters launching." Sumin banked hard, watching as dozens of Vork fighters poured from the hangar bays of the remaining ships. They were larger than the human craft, heavily armored and armed. "Exactly as expected," she replied. "Split and bait. Let's see if they're as slow as our simulations predicted." The human fighters scattered, each drawing several Vork pursuers away from the main group. Instead of fleeing, Sumin cut her engines suddenly, allowing momentum to carry her forward while reducing her heat signature. The Vork fighters shot past, unable to adjust in time. She powered up again, now behind her pursuers, and locked weapons. 2 short bursts, and both enemy craft erupted into flames. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as the human pilots used tactics developed over centuries of aerial and space combat. The Vork, accustomed to overwhelming frightened opponents, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Below, on the planet's surface, Captain Young and his team of 30 Special Forces operatives moved silently through the ruins of what had once been the Antheri capital city. Their stealth suits rendered them nearly invisible in the darkness. "Command, we've reached the labor camp," Young whispered into his communicator. Preparing for infiltration. The camp was surrounded by high-energy fences, with Vork guards patrolling the perimeter. Inside, thousands of Antheri were confined to crude shelters, their once bright skin now dull with dust and despair. Young signaled his team to spread out. They had studied Vork patrol patterns for weeks, identifying the perfect moment to strike. When the guard rotation began, they moved. 4 operatives fired specialized EMP darts simultaneously, disabling the fence in multiple locations without triggering alarms. The rest of the team slipped through, heading for the largest structure where their intelligence suggested Antheri leaders were being held. They found them huddled in a cold metal room, once proud elders now thin and beaten. When Young removed his helmet, showing his human face, an elderly Antheri stepped forward. "You came back," he said in a voice rough from disuse. "We promised we would," Young replied, opening his pack to reveal dozens of small weapons. "And we brought these. Are your people ready to fight?" The elder straightened, his eyes finding new determination. "We have always been a peaceful species, but for our children, for our future, we will learn." As Young's team distributed weapons and began basic training, more Special Forces units were doing the same at camps across the planet. The plan wasn't simply to defeat the Vork military. It was to inspire a full-scale uprising. In orbit, Major Su Min's squad had disabled 3 of the 5 Guardian ships. The remaining 2 were now calling desperately for reinforcements from the main battle, exactly as Admiral Dai had predicted. "Guerrilla Squad, form up," she ordered. "Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2. Her fighters regrouped, then dove toward the planet's atmosphere. As they descended, they launched their remaining weapons at key Vork ground installations, communication centers, vehicle depots, energy plants. By the time they reached the surface, fires were burning across Vork facilities planet-wide. Confusion spread through enemy ranks as commands failed to reach troops and power systems crashed. In the main battle, Captain Hannah Lee received Major Su Min's confirmation signal. She immediately ordered her fleet to execute a complex maneuver, splitting into 3 groups that surrounded the disorganized Vork warships. The Vork had expected an army, she told her bridge crew as the trap closed. They got wolves. As dawn broke over the Antheri homeworld, the sound of battle echoed across once peaceful valleys. Led by human special forces, Antheri fighters reclaimed their cities 1 block at a time. In orbit, the remnants of the Vork Guardian fleet drifted powerless, while the main force found itself surrounded and outmaneuvered. The battle for Antheri had begun, and humanity had drawn first blood. Admiral Daiwan stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, hands clasped behind his back, as he studied the massive tactical display. The battle for Antheri had raged for 36 hours without pause. His fleet had performed better than expected, disabling or destroying 11 Vork warships while losing only 3 of their own. On the planet below, the Antheri uprising had reclaimed 4 major cities. But Dai knew better than to celebrate too early. The Vork were wounded, not defeated. And wounded predators were often the most dangerous. "Admiral," Lieutenant Min called urgently from the sensor station. Multiple jump signatures detected at the system's edge. They called reinforcements. The bridge crew tensed as new red markers appeared on the tactical display. 15 massive Vork warships had just arrived, their energy signatures dwarfing even the largest vessels in the current battle. "Put them on screen," Day ordered calmly. The main view screen shifted to show the new arrivals. These ships were different. Darker, more heavily armored, with enormous weapon ports glowing with energy. Elite forces, far more dangerous than the colonial fleet they had been fighting. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "Captain Lee is requesting instructions. Her fleet is still engaged with the remnants of the First Fork Force." Several officers looked at Dai with concern. The battle plan hadn't accounted for reinforcements of this magnitude. By all conventional logic, they should retreat while they still could. Admiral Dai nodded calmly. "Tell Captain Lee to continue her engagement. And Lieutenant Min, signal Commander Kang. Spring the trap." Relief washed over the bridge. There was a plan after all. Far from the main battlefield, hidden within the dense asteroid belt that circled the outer reaches of the Anthary system, 20 human warships powered up their systems. For days they had drifted dark and silent, their hulls coated with asteroid dust to mask their presence from Vork sensors. Commander Kang's son stood on the bridge of the UES Shadow Strike, watching as his crew prepared for battle. These ships represented humanity's greatest secret, vessels with experimental stealth technology that had never been tested in combat until now. Signal from Admiral Day received. His communications officer reported. "Operation Checkmate is a go." Kang allowed himself a small smile. "All ships, full power to engines and weapons. Formation Delta. Target their engines and weapons systems first." 20 ships surged forward from their hiding places, emerging like ghosts from the asteroid field directly behind the newly arrived Vork reinforcements. The Vork never saw them coming. Focused entirely on the battle ahead, their sensors oriented toward the planet, they were completely unprepared for an attack from behind. The first salvo from the human stealth fleet struck with devastating precision, disabling the engines of 4 Vork ships before they could even respond. The second volley targeted weapon systems, leaving the massive vessels partially crippled. Only then did the Vork realize they had fallen into a trap. Their perfectly ordered formation dissolved into chaos as they tried to turn and face this new threat, while still dealing with Captain Lee's forces advancing from the planet. Admiral Da watched with satisfaction as his carefully laid trap unfolded. The Vork reinforcements found themselves caught in a devastating crossfire, with Commander Kang's fleet behind them and Captain Lee's forces ahead. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Commander Hyun," Lieutenant Min reported. "Put her through," Dae ordered. Commander Hyun's face appeared on a secondary screen. Behind her, the interior of a Vork vessel was visible, along with several members of her infiltration team working at alien control panels. "Admiral, we've successfully breached the Vork command ship," she reported, her voice steady despite the sounds of fighting in the background. "We've secured the central communication hub and downloaded their strategic database." This was the most dangerous part of the plan. A small team of Special Forces operators had used the chaos of battle to dock with and infiltrate the Vork flagship. Their mission was considered nearly suicidal, but vital. "Casualties?" Dai asked. 3 wounded, 1 critical, but we've achieved our objective." Hyun's expression hardened. "Sir, we've found their records. The atrocities against the Anthary are worse than we imagined. They've been experimenting on children, harvesting biological materials. And the Anthary aren't the first. We found records of at least 7 other species they've subjugated or eradicated." Dai's jaw tightened. "Proceed with Phase 2, Commander." Hyun nodded. Broadcasting now. Her team had rerouted the Vork's own communication system, creating an open channel that reached not just every ship in the battle, but every Vork-controlled communication device in the system. What they broadcast was the Vork's own recorded footage, the systematic destruction of Anthary cities, the separation of families, the medical experiments on captives. Most crucially, they included the Vork leadership discussions, translated into multiple languages, the cold calculations of how to extract maximum resources from biological assets, plans for processing facilities for non-essential population segments, and discussions of which species to target next. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate and powerful. The remaining free Antheri, seeing the full extent of what had been planned for them, fought with renewed desperation. Human crews, already motivated, found new reserves of determination. But the most unexpected effect came from the smaller Vork vessels. Several broke formation, their commanders apparently unwilling to continue fighting now that the true nature of their mission was exposed to all. Admiral, Lieutenant Min reported with surprise. 3 Vork support ships are powering down weapons. They appear to be surrendering. Day raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. Accept their surrender. Have boarding teams ready. On the main view screen, the battle had clearly shifted. The trapped Vork reinforcement fleet was being systematically disabled by Commander Kang's stealth ships, while Captain Lee's forces pushed forward relentlessly. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the Vork command vessel is attempting to jump out of the system. Not today, Daz said quietly. Signal Commander Hyun to proceed with the final phase. Aboard the Vork flagship, Hyun's team planted the specialized charges they had carried with them. Not designed to destroy the ship, but to permanently disable its jump drive and main power systems. As they raced back to their shuttle, Hyun took one last look at the Vork command center they had infiltrated. On every screen, the evidence of atrocities continued to play, a testimony that could not be silenced. The battle for Antheri wasn't over, but the turning point had been reached. For the first time, the Vork faced not just defeat, but accountability. Admiral Daiwon stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, hands clasped behind his back as he studied the massive tactical display. The battle for Antheri had raged for 36 hours without pause. His fleet had performed better than expected, disabling or destroying 11 Vork warships while losing only 3 of their own. On the planet below, the Antheri uprising had reclaimed 4 major cities. But Da knew better than to celebrate too early. The Vork were wounded, not defeated, and wounded predators were often the most dangerous. Admiral, Lieutenant Min called urgently from the sensor station. Multiple jump signatures detected at the system's edge. They've called reinforcements. The bridge crew tensed as new red markers appeared on the tactical display. 15 massive Vork warships had just arrived, their energy signatures dwarfing even the largest vessels in the current battle. Put them on screen, Day ordered calmly. The main view screen shifted to show the new arrivals. These ships were different. Darker, more heavily armored, with enormous weapon ports glowing with energy. Elite forces, far more dangerous than the colonial fleet they had been fighting. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Vork vessel. Day nodded. On screen, the image changed to show a Vork commander, larger and more decorated than any they had seen before. Its exoskeleton gleamed with metallic implants that suggested both rank and extensive cybernetic enhancement. Humans, the translated voice boomed. You have interfered with Vork Dominion territory. This pathetic resistance ends now. We have conquered dozens of species across 3 sectors. The Antheri are merely the latest to serve the Dominion. The Vork commander gestured, and the view widened to show captured aliens of various species working in what appeared to be a massive engine room. Some had physical similarities to the Antheri, while others were completely different. Evidence of the Vork's extensive conquests. Surrender now, and perhaps your species will be granted worker status rather than immediate processing. The transmission ended. The bridge was silent for a moment. Well, Daz said quietly. At least they're honest about their intentions. He turned to his tactical officer. Is the second fleet in position? Yes, Admiral. Commander Kang reports all 20 ships are ready and waiting in the asteroid belt. Day nodded. Tell Captain Lee to execute maneuver Thermopylae. Several officers exchanged surprised glances. Thermopylae was an ancient Earth battle where a small force had held a narrow pass against a much larger army. It seemed suicidal against the overwhelming Vork reinforcements. On the main screen, they watched as Captain Lee's fleet began a fighting retreat, drawing the Vork ships into a narrow corridor between two dense asteroid fields. It appeared to be a desperate attempt to find defensible terrain in the vastness of space. The Vork fleet followed eagerly, their massive ships advancing in perfect formation, like predators closing in for the kill. "They're taking the bait," Lieutenant Min reported. "Vork fleet is fully committed to the pursuit." Day allowed himself a small smile. History is full of lessons for those who study it. The Vork clearly never read about Admiral Yi Sun-sin and the Battle of Myeongyang. On his command tablet, he pulled up an image of an ancient Korean naval battle where 13 ships had defeated a fleet of 133 by luring them into a narrow strait with strong currents. "Space has no water," he continued, "but it does have gravity wells and asteroid fields, and arrogant enemies who don't expect traps." He tapped his command console. "Commence Operation Myeongyang." From their hiding places within the asteroid belt, Commander Kang's stealth fleet powered up. But instead of attacking immediately, they activated powerful gravitational tau beams, targeting specific asteroids that had been carefully selected and prepared days earlier. Dozens of massive space rocks began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as they entered the gravitational corridor Captain Lee had deliberately created by the positioning of her fleet. "Sir, asteroid field destabilizing," the science officer reported with professional calm. "Artificial avalanche commencing." On the tactical display, they watched as the trap unfolded. The Vork fleet, committed to their pursuit of what they thought was a retreating enemy, suddenly found themselves in the path of a manufactured asteroid storm. Their perfect formation became their downfall, as ships collided with each other trying to avoid the incoming rocks. "Admiral," Lieutenant Min reported, "Commander Hyun's team has successfully docked with the Vork command ship under cover of the asteroid storm." Day nodded grimly. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. A 12-person infiltration team had used the chaos to attach their stealth shuttle to the Vork flagship. Their mission was considered nearly suicidal, but vital. "Now we wait," he said. Deep within the Vork command ship, Commander Hyun Jin led her team through dark corridors. Their adaptive camouflage suits rendered them nearly invisible against the ship's interior. 2 team members remained at their entry point, securing their escape route. The other 10 moved silently toward the central data hub. "Junction ahead," whispered Lieutenant Park, their tech specialist. "Security sensors active." Hyun signaled a halt. They had studied Vork security systems extensively, but much remained unknown. She nodded to Park, who attached a small device to the wall. It pulsed once, sending out a specialized EMP that temporarily disabled nearby sensors without triggering alarms. "We have 3 minutes," Park reported. They moved quickly through the junction and into a massive chamber filled with data storage units. Park immediately connected to a terminal, while the rest of the team secured the room. "Commander," Park called softly, "you need to see this." Hyun joined him at the terminal. The screen displayed thousands of files, automatically translated by their systems. What she saw made her blood run cold. "They're not just conquering species," she said. "They're cataloging them. Genetic viability, organ compatibility, resource extraction potential. They see everyone as nothing but raw materials." The files contained detailed reports on dozens of conquered worlds. Species were categorized by usefulness, some as labor, others as food sources, many simply as biomatter for processing. "Download everything," Hyun ordered. "Then set up the broadcast node." While Park copied the files, Surgeon Kwan prepared their final device, a specialized transmitter designed to override and control the Vork's own communication systems. "Ready, Commander," Kwan reported. Hyun nodded. "Connect to Admiral Da. Let him know we're in position." Aboard the Vengeance, Day received the confirmation signal. "All ships, prepare for Phase 3. Commander Hyun, you may begin the broadcast." Across the Anthony system, On every ship and communication device controlled by the Vork, screens suddenly changed. The Vork's own records began to play. Footage of conquered worlds, scientific reports on processing sentient beings, and strategic plans for expanding their harvesting operations to new species. Most damning were the command-level discussions about humans, dismissing them as primitive but potentially useful muscle tissue donors, and planning the systematic harvesting of Earth once the Antheri situation was resolved. The effect was immediate. Human crews, already fighting with determination, found new reserves of fury. The Antheri resistance fighters, seeing the full horror planned for their children, fought with desperate intensity. But something unexpected happened as well. On 3 smaller Vork vessels, crew members apparently revolted, their ships suddenly breaking formation and powering down weapons. "Sir," Lieutenant Min reported with surprise, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Vork ships. Some are requesting asylum." Day raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. Accept their surrender. Have security teams ready for boarding. The tide had turned. What had begun as a mission to save one species had revealed a threat to all life in the sector, and humanity had just proven itself the shield against that threat. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of what had once been the Grand Assembly Hall of the Antheri. The building stood as one of the few structures not completely destroyed during the Vork occupation. Its white stone walls were now scarred with weapon fire, and parts of the domed ceiling had collapsed, allowing beams of light to create patterns on the floor below. 3 months had passed since the final Vork ship had been driven from the Antheri system. The battle had been costly. 5 human vessels lost with all hands, 7 more severely damaged. But the victory had been complete. The Vork fleet had retreated in disarray, leaving behind disabled ships and thousands of their own kind as prisoners. Representative Jin stood quietly at the edge of the assembly floor, watching as Antheri families reunited with loved ones rescued from labor camps. Her diplomatic uniform was crisp and formal, a stark contrast to the rebuilding efforts visible through the windows. Earth had sent not just diplomats but engineers, doctors, and builders to help the Antheri recover. "It is still difficult to believe," a voice said beside her. Jin turned to see Elder Lon, the oldest surviving member of the Antheri Council. His once bright skin had dulled during captivity, and he walked with the assistance of a cane, a legacy of Vork mistreatment. "Believe what, Elder?" Jin asked. "That salvation would come from a species we barely knew." The Elder's large eyes blinked slowly. The Vork had conquered so many worlds. Many older, more advanced civilizations than yours saw what was happening and did nothing. They calculated the risk and decided non-intervention was wiser. Jin nodded. The diplomatic briefings had included information about several advanced species who had known of the Vork expansion but had chosen isolation over confrontation. "Humans calculate risks differently," she said simply. The Elder gestured toward the center of the hall, where a formal ceremony was about to begin. Representatives from Earth and Antheri would sign the first mutual defense treaty, establishing a framework for future cooperation. "Come," he said. "It is time." Jin followed Elder Lon to the center of the hall, where Admiral Dai and Captain Lee stood with other human military leaders. The remains of the Antheri Council gathered opposite them. Between the groups sat a simple stone table, a traditional place of Antheri agreements for thousands of years. As Jin took her position beside the Admiral, a hush fell over the hall. Elder Lon stepped forward, using his cane for support, but standing as tall as his aged frame allowed. "For 10,000 years, the Antheri have been a people of peace," he began, his voice carrying through the hall despite its weakness. "We explored the stars seeking knowledge and friendship. When the Vork came, we tried to reason with them. We offered cooperation." His voice faltered. They saw only resources to be harvested. The Elder looked directly at the human delegation. "We had lost hope. Then your ships came. You had no obligation to fight for us. You had no treaties binding you to our defense. You came because you heard a cry for help." The Elder moved to the stone table, and placed his hand upon the treaty document. You came when no one else would. You fought for those you had never met. Jin stepped forward and bowed deeply in the Antheri tradition, holding the position for several heartbeats before rising. That is what humanity does, she replied simply. We protect the innocent. Her words, translated through the communication devices, echoed through the hall. The Antheri delegates touched their foreheads in a sign of respect. With this agreement, Elder Lon continued, we forge a bond between our peoples, not as protector and protected, but as equals who share a vision of freedom for all sentient beings. The signing ceremony proceeded with solemn dignity. When completed, the hall erupted in sounds of celebration, a mixture of human applause and the musical tones Antheri used to express joy. As the formal proceedings ended, Jin's communication device chimed. She stepped away to answer, surprised to see it was a priority message from Earth Command. Representative Jin, the message began. Classified information follows. The broadcast of Vork atrocities has spread far beyond the Antheri system. We are receiving signals from at least 7 worlds previously thought to be under complete Vork control. Indigenous populations are rising up. 3 worlds have already overthrown their occupiers. Jin looked up from the message to see Admiral Dai approaching, his own device in hand. His expression told her he'd received similar news. It seems we've started something much bigger than we intended, he said quietly. Jin nodded. The Vork built their empire on fear. Once that fear is broken, everything changes, the Admiral finished. Thousands of light years away, in the central command hub of the Vork Dominion, Supreme Leader Vex slammed his armored fist into the tactical display, shattering the screen. Around the table, his generals and advisors flinched but remained silent. How is this possible? Vex demanded, his translator struggling to convey the full fury in his voice. These humans were unknown to us a year ago. A primitive fractured species barely capable of interstellar travel. Now they've not only defeated our forces but inspired rebellion across our territory. His chief military advisor, Commander Zorn, stepped forward cautiously. Supreme Leader, we have lost contact with 3 resource worlds. 17 others report major uprisings. The broadcast from the captured command ship has spread to every corner of the Dominion. And these, humans, what do we know of their intentions? They appear to be establishing a defensive perimeter around the Antheri system. Our intelligence suggests they are sending small, fast vessels to other worlds, possibly to assist other rebellions. Vex turned to the viewport, looking out at the vast fleet assembled around the Vork homeworld. For centuries, the Dominion had expanded unchallenged, harvesting worlds and species with methodical efficiency. What are these humans? He demanded, more to himself than to his advisors. What makes them different? His science advisor hesitated before speaking. Supreme Leader, our preliminary analysis of their combat tactics suggests something unique among species we have encountered. They fight not merely for survival or resources, but for principles. For others, it is difficult to calculate responses to such behavior. Vex turned back to the table, where reports continued to stream in from across Vork territory. More uprisings, more losses, more uncertainty. Prepare the home fleet, he ordered. We will crush these humans and make an example of them. Once they are processed, these rebellions will end. But even as he spoke, Vex felt something unfamiliar, a sensation the Vork rarely experienced. Doubt. Across the galaxy, the message continued to spread like wildfire among the subjugated species. The Vork can be defeated, and humanity stands ready to help. A new age had begun.